Cassia B, by the lovely glow of my computer, looking blue as fuck. Gonna read part 15 of section 3 of Immanuel Kant's The Critique of the Power of Judgment, Cambridge edition. Going fast, trying to get it done. Let's do it tomorrow. Okay. The judgment of taste is entirely independent from the concept of perfection. Goodbye, glow of the computer light. Welcome, glow of my screensaver. Objective purposiveness can be cognized only by means of the relation to the manifold to a determining end, thus only through a concept. From this alone, it is already clear that the beautiful, the judging of which has its ground a merely formal purposiveness, i.e., a purposiveness without an end, is entirely independent from the representation of the good. Since the latter purposiveness is an objective purposiveness, i.e., the relation of the object to the determinate end. Objective purposiveness is either external, i.e., the utility of the object, or internal, i.e., its perfection, that the satisfaction in object on the account of which we call it beauty could not rest on the representation of its utility is sufficiently obvious from the two preceding main sections, since in that case it would not be an immediate satisfaction in the object, which latter the essential condition of the judgment about beauty, but an objective inner purposiveness, i.e. perfection about beauty. I.e. perfection already comes closer to the predicate of beauty, and has therefore been held to be identical with beauty even by philosophers of repute, through with the proviso, if it is thought confusedly, it is of the greatest importance in critique of taste to determine whether the beauty is reducible in the concept of perfection. To judge the objective purposiveness, we always require the concept of an end, and if that purposiveness is not to be an external one, utility, but an internal one, we require a concept of an internal end, which contains the ground of the internal possibility of the object. Now, as an end in general, it is that the concept of which can be regarded as the ground of the possibility of the object itself. Thus, in order to represent an object's purposiveness in a thing, that the concept of what sort of thing it is supposed to be must come first, and the agreement of the manifold in the thing with this concept, which supplies the rule for the combination of the manifold in it, is the qualitative perfection of a thing. Qualitative perfection is the completeness of anything in its own kind, and it is entirely distinct from this, and is a mere concept of magnitude, of totality, in which what the thing is supposed to be is thought of as already determined, and it is only asked whether everything that is requisite for it exists. What is formal in the representation of a thing, i.e. the agreement of the manifold with a unity, leaving undetermined what is supposed to be, does not by itself allow any cognition of objective purposiveness at all, because since the attribution is made from the unity as an end with what the thing is supposed to be, nothing remains but the subjective purposiveness of representation in the mind of the beholder. Please take it off Bluetooth. As an end, what the thing is supposed to be, nothing remains but the subjective purposiveness of a representation in the mind of the beholder, which indicates a certain purposiveness of the representational state of the subject, and in this is an ease in apprehending a given form of the imagination, but not the perfection of any object, which is hence not conceived through any concept of the end. E.g., I don't know what that stands for. If I encounter the forest of a plot of grass around which the trees stand in a circle, I do not represent a purpose for it. Say that it is to serve for country dancing, then not the slightest concept of perfection is given through the mere form, but to represent a formal objective purposiveness without an end, i.e., the mere form of perfection without any material and concept with which it is to agree, even if it were only the idea of lawfulness in general, is veritable contradiction. Now the judgment of taste is an aesthetic judgment, i.e., one that rests on the subjective grounds, and determining ground cannot be concept, and thus not a concept of determining end. Thus, by its beauty, a formal subjective purposeness, there is not conceived any perfection of the object as supposedly formal, yet also objective purposiveness, and the distinction between the concepts of beauty and good, as if both differed only in logical form, the former being a confused but the latter a distinct concept of perfection, while they were otherwise identical in the content and origin, is null, because in that case there would be no specific difference between them. Rather, a judgment of taste would be just as much cognitive judgment as the judgment whereby something is declared to be good, just as when the ordinary man, when he says that deception is unjust, grounds his judgment on confused principles, while the philosopher grounds his on distinct ones. But at the bottom of these are identical principles of reason. But I have already pointed out in the aesthetic judgment of a unique kind and afford absolutely no cognition, not even a confused one, of the object, which happens only in a logical judgment, while the former, by contrast, relates a representation by which an object is given solely to the subject and does not bring out our attention to any property of the object, but only the purposive form and the determination of the power of representation that are occupied with it. The judgment is also called aesthetic precisely because it is determining ground that is not a concept but a feeling of inner sense, and that unison of the play of the powers of the mind insofar as they can only be stressed. By contrast, if one were to call confused concepts in the objective judgment that is grounded in them aesthetic, one would have to have an understanding that judged by the senses or senses that represent its object through concepts, both of which are self-contradictory. The faculty of concept, be they confused or distinct in the understanding, and although understanding also belongs to the judgment of taste as an aesthetic judgment, as in all judgments, it does not belong to its faculty for the cognition of an object, but as a faculty of the determination of the judgment and its representation without a concept, in accordance with the relation of the representation to subject and its internal feeling, and it's indeed insofar as this judgment is possible in accordance with the universal rule. Thank God I had my 1 week of debate experience. Jesus.